Look what I have here. Those two smartphones here. On the first glance, this looks like this might be the successor of this one here. But actually, yeah, it is, of course. But it is even more to it. Because here you can see there's written Leica on it, where here, XMAGE. This is the Mate 40 Pro. This is the Mate 80 Pro Max. I think we should do a little bit of a camera comparison as they look so similar. So let's get started. And we start off directly with the front-facing camera side by side. Wider field of view by default, 0.8 times magnification on the Mate 40 Pro, where we can go wider on the Mate 80 Pro as well, which is 21mm, but still it feels a bit wider there on the 40 Pro than on the 80 Pro. But what do you think? Which one is looking better here? Do we have autofocus? I don't think so. Mate 40 Pro doesn't have it, but the Mate 80 Pro has it. Let's go wider even on the Mate 40 Pro. It can go even wider, but I think stabilization suffers a bit there. So let's go to 0.8 times and maybe 1x here and 1x there. So still I think a little bit wider there on the Mate 40 Pro than the Mate 80 Pro Max. What do you think about this? Both can record 4K 30 frames per second. Not so sure if I can record 4K 60 on the front there on the Mate 40 Pro. But nevertheless, which one is working better? Which one is better for vlogging? Which one is better for videos? Stabilization, colors, maybe a bit of HDR. Let's check it out. Look very similar on screen. Way brighter picture and display on the Mate 80 Pro Max though. And now the main video cameras. Yes, I'm talking about the video cameras here on the back, because we have a dedicated 0.8 times, I think 80mm ultra wide angle on the Mate 40 Pro, Cine lens so-called. We're using the 1x sensor there on the 80 Pro Max, so a bit of more bokeh probably on the 80 Pro Max, but you be the judge there. Maybe make it a little bit fair. Let's go to the 1x sensor on the Mate 40 as well, just by going in a little bit. There we go. We don't have any buttons. It's just a slider, the old EMUI slider that we have to use there on the Mate 40 Pro. So what do you think about the quality on both here using their main camera sensors? What about stabilization, colors and so on? Now let's go to the ultra wide angle. First the Mate 40 Pro, a nice slider. Slide out to white, and here we have a button to white. Actually, there we go. Button to white. There you go. My fingers are too fat. Anyway, wider definitely on the Mate 80 Pro Max, but the quality should be better on the Mate 40 because it has a larger sensor. So which one is working better for vlogging here? I think I have to give it to the Mate 40 Pro, but yeah, you be the judge which one you like better here for this ultra wide angle footage there. And let's try to zoom in a bit. So both on the ultra wide angles here, and yeah, it is less expected wider on the Mate 80 Pro Max. Let's try to zoom in. I have a 4x zoom button here on the Mate 80. I have to slowly zoom in to, wow, it's more than 4x. 4x on the Mate 40. Definitely cleaner on the Mate 80 Pro Max. They are not only on screen. I can go to 10x even if I want to. Very clean. And here I can go also. Now it's switched lenses. Oh, let's go to 10x as well. Might be a bit more cropped in because we have 27mm by default on the 1x, so it should be cropped in also at 10x a little bit more. Which one is performing better? We can even go further, like 15x here. I think this is the limit here on the Mate 40 Pro Max, so 15x there. And we can go even further there on the Mate 80 Pro Max up to 30x, so this is the huge difference and benefit of that. Can directly go to 1x, where here I have to use the slider to go to 1x. So which one is performing better in terms of stabilization, colors? I don't want to test the audio because audio, I know both have good audio, but I'm using the Mate 80 Pro Max with my wireless mic now because too many cars passing by. And I think we should check out the photos now. When we check out the ultra wide angle, we can clearly see the more wide field of view on the Mate 80 Pro Max, 30mm versus 18mm. So there's a bit of a downside if you optimize the ultra wide angle for a cinematic kind of view, 18mm, which is very cool. I liked it also on the Nubia Z60 Ultra, and I think the Z80 Ultra also has this 18mm. Very good, very nice for vlogging. Truly a cine lens. But it's not for ultra wide angle. Such shots like this one, way wider on the Mate 80 Pro Max, way more spectacular for such buildings and so on. What you can see here is a bit more muted colors, not so much contrast in the colors in general. The yellows are a bit more yellow here, where here it's a bit more going towards less poppy colors on the 40 Pro. Then we check out the zoom. There's quite interesting that the tele lens on the Mate 40 Pro has 5x. So this is equivalent of 135mm, which is quite cropped in. Where the Mate 80 Pro Max has 96mm crop in, I think from 91mm, which is the native focal length there. In terms of HDR, I was surprised that the Mate 40 Pro can keep up with the Mate 80 Pro Max there. It has a bit of less yellowish kind of color there. It's a bit of hazy here, yes. But overall, I think both are doing a fine job. But the sharpness and detail level, even though we have less zoom here on the 80 Pro Max, is much more detailed. You can clearly see it here. It is much more detailed. The difference is night and day. We check out the main camera sensors. I'm also quite surprised that the Mate 40 Pro Max with its main camera sensor can keep up with the newer in terms of HDR. Almost. There's a slight difference there in colors again, more cooler on the 40 Pro, where the 80 Pro Max is warmer. But you can see here, HDR, there is a difference. So yes, the newer sensor is and should be better, and you can clearly see it. There's more wide, more overexposed areas here. Then when we look at the detail levels, you can also see the difference between the sensors. Here it's almost a mushy kind of shade. You don't see the shades like it should be here, clearly separated here as well. Here you can still see that they're separated, where here's just a gray area. And this is something that you can see not only there, but if you look carefully, also like for the greeneries here, it looks like a bit painted, a bit edited, a bit sharpened up too much on the 40 Pro. A bit noise that I try to calculate out there as well, where the 80 Pro Max doesn't have any issues there at all. So this is a difference not only in processing power, but also sensor and how they are processing such things here. Otherwise, the shadows are kept a little bit darker on the 80 Pro Max, where here it's a bit more lifted on the 40 Pro. Close-up shots with the telesensor was a thing even with the Mate 40 Pro. As you see here, it is not the best, however, for close-up shots, but it was able to do a shot that is very close to what the Mate 80 Pro Max is doing here, but it's way more detailed for sure, and the focus is nailing this way nicer than on the 40 Pro. Otherwise, in terms of colors, much more punchy colors, more vibrant colors on the 80 Pro, where the 40 Pro has a bit more duller colors, more natural colors. I'm quite surprised how well the selfies are doing here. Both are doing a fine job, and for that matter, let's check. We have 21mm here and we have 22mm here. So they should be roughly the same kind of widths. It's a bit wider there on the 80 Pro Max, where in the video I had the impression that it was complete opposite. Colors, way more face colorish warm on the 80 Pro Max, where it's a bit cooler, more natural looking on the 40 Pro. Quite surprised about the colors, but I like them on the 40 Pro a bit better there. Sharpness and detail levels, here you can see the difference. Like the editing is way more heavy on the 40 Pro, or looks more artificial with the eyebrows, with the eyes and everything, but it's still keeping up in terms of details with the 80 Pro, where the 80 Pro looks a bit more natural, especially with the eyebrows not being so ridiculously redrawn. Sharpness, however, is also something where you notice that the 40 Pro is a bit overdoing it with sharpness and editing. You can see here with the beard hair and everything else that it's sharpening everything nice up. It's a bit cooler again, it's a bit warmer, but I'm surprised how good the selfies are. And this shows also that in terms of selfie department, not much progress has happened here. When we check out 10x zoom now with the tele, it should be with the 5x through just a 2x crop, a good picture. It looks a bit more natural, I have to say, here on the 40 Pro from the color wise. A bit more artificially, more contrasty, artificially punched up colors there for sure, and definitely more edited and a bit of paint like on the 80 Pro Max already. But this is showing also the difference what several years will make and several generations of phones will make. You can read everything on this sign. You know when you can go to the dentist here, where here on the Mate 40 Pro you have to step closer because you cannot read it. And then the main camera sensor, just to show you the difference between the colors, again XMAGE colors on the Mate 80 Pro Max and Leica colors on the 40 Pro. And because we have a bit of a difference, like 27 millimeters here and here we have 24, I try to match it up. It's very hard to match it up, but I ended up with this, which is pretty much very close. So we have like 30 millimeters. It's like a bit closer there. But you can see the difference here. We have much more darker shadows kept in on the Mate 40 Pro. The colors are a bit more duller in general, where it's a bit more warmish, and a bit better HDR suppression, where here's like going a bit towards more whitish, which is like thin clipping also a little bit already. So there you can see the difference between those two. In terms of sharpness and detail level, I think both are doing a fine job there. It's a bit of noise creeping in already on the 40 Pro and a bit darker here because of the less raised shadows, let's say it like this. But also the detail levels here. It's quite close on the 40 Pro, but you will see when you look at the details, finer details, foliage and otherwise, that the 80 Pro Max naturally has an advantage over the 40 Pro. But if you still own a 40 Pro and just want to take it for a vacation, for taking some photos, the Leica colors are still solid, and I'm quite surprised, even though it cannot really compete with a super flagship, what you can get out of there is still, I would say, a pretty good photo. And let's check out close-up shots again with the telesensor. Quite interesting that we have the ability also on the 40 Pro, even though the details are not the greatest there. And the 80 Pro has way more shallow depth of field, which shows also that we have a larger sensor there, but also way more details here. This is the same thing. There you see the difference that generations do here. Also, telemacro was not a thing when the Mate 40 Pro came out. So yes, this is an advantage of the newer generation. And shallow depth of field of the main sensor is quite interesting. Yes, it's a bit of smaller sensor, I think, on the Mate 40 Pro. Or is it a larger sensor? Looks almost identical, I have to say, between those two. In terms of color-wise, again, a bit more punchy colors, a bit more warmish colors here. The depth of field seems to be a little bit larger there on the 40 Pro, where it's a bit less large, so you can see the out of focus area is appearing much faster than here. So this is sensor size and aperture probably that are playing a role there with those kinds of shots here with the main camera sensor. But pretty close. This is very interesting shot in my opinion. Just a white balance difference, like warmer, colder. That's basically it. And then in terms of colors, again, with the main camera sensor now, both try to match 35mm. I think I got exactly 35mm here as well, f1.9 versus f1.4. There you can see the difference in terms of light intake, but also in terms of colors. First of all, I was quite surprised to see that those Leica colors that usually tend to like as bit less saturated are a bit more saturated on the Mate 40 Pro in comparison to the 80 Pro Max. It's not only brightness difference here of the red, it's also punchiness of the colors that is a difference between those two. Otherwise, both doing a fine job. Here I would even say the yellow star is a bit more visible than here for the license plate. And which one you prefer here in this regard? It's quite so fascinating to see how well Huawei tuned their Mate 40 series back in the day, how well it can still keep up with nowadays smartphones, which is quite interesting. But yeah, if you pixel peep, this is where you see the differences between those two. A bit more details there, a bit separation between the branches and the background there, where here is just melting into one blob. Same goes for here. People and the rest there, a bit blurry. This is still a bit sharper there. So yeah, this is the big difference between those two. Yes, you can see in several locations, like close-up shots with the telesensor. The telesensor is especially the advantage of the newer generation. And you really have to pixel peep for the main camera sensor. That shows how well Huawei tuned their main camera sensor on the Mate 40 series already. And the ultra-wide angle, yes, it's much wider on the 80 Pro Max. It was a completely different kind of story when the Mate 40 Pro came out. They wanted to tune it for cinema, for cinelens, vlogging, and yeah, it's a different kind of beast there. Which one you like better? Tell me in the comments. Overall, I think the winner is clear, the Mate 80 Pro Max, but in terms of color science, the preference might go one way or the other. So tell me in the comments what you like better in terms of colors. In normal daylight shots, you did not see so much difference with the main camera sensor. Now we're using the portraits here. And the interesting thing is that the Mate 40 Pro cannot utilize its telesensor for portraits, which is a bit of a shame. So the only thing that you can do is like crop into the main sensor. And this is what it does. 3x versus, I tried to match it up with 3x, but this is like 81 millimeters. And the Mate 80 Pro Max, I managed to get it at 83 millimeters. But you can clearly see already warmer kind of picture. Less blur on the Mate 40 series, where we have more blur here. When I go to 100%, you can see it is a bit of a crop of the main because nothing is really sharp, but be prepared for the Mate 40 Ultra. That's a night and day difference. This looks like it was shot on a potato camera in comparison to what we have here. So yes, the technology has developed fast. You can see both. This is way overblown already, overexposed. This is also overexposed slightly, but still more detailed there than what we have here. So yes, Mate 40 Pro definitely not a monster when it comes to portraits, especially at 3x. When we go and zoom out a little bit at 2x here, which is still a bit more cropped in because this is now 54 millimeters, where here where 2x is 40, it's written here, 48 millimeters. So, but still, it's the same kind of thing. Here it is even better on the Mate 80 Pro Max than with the 3x crop, naturally, because it's just a 2x crop. And then look at the Mate 40 Pro, don't be shocked, but this is the huge difference here, that also sensor technology and processing made, because yes, the processing has evolved, but also sensor tech has evolved. Much more megapixels, the ability to do this 2x zoom almost lossless by just using the center pieces of the pixels of the sensor, just has evolved quite a bit, and there you can clearly see it when it comes to those kinds of shots. Now let's go to something that is more interesting, maybe 35 millimeters. Still a little bit of a crop of the main sensor, because I think 23 millimeters or 24 millimeters or even 27 maybe borderline it's still usable, but 24 or 23 millimeters for a portrait shot doesn't make any sense in my opinion. But then I would just stick to the normal photo mode. But 35 makes a lot of sense. Color-wise, do we see much of a difference here between those two? Yes, first of all, HDR being slightly better there on the 80 Pro Max. Then we have a bit of a greenish tint on the Mate 40 Pro. I'm not sure if it's this RYYB sensor that we are seeing here already. Much more punchy colors on the Mate 80 Pro Max, where it's a bit faded here, a bit more. And then the white balance a bit more whitish, bluish, greenish on the Mate 40 Pro. Let's take a look at the Mate 40 Pro. Not bad for when it came out, the phone, but here is also the difference. So you can clearly see the details, the colors fading for one end. This is just a night and day difference, much more natural looking on the Mate 80 Pro Max. There you can clearly see it. This is, I think, probably the best shot from the Mate 84 Pro, Mate 40 Pro. But still, in terms of portraits, it just cannot compete at all. It's like the portraits revolution started later, where we had really optimized portrait photography. And I think on nowadays flagships like the Mate 80 Pro Max, you can clearly see you have better portrait. Same goes for cutouts and so on. It's just like you will see that the cutouts are a bit wrong, and this is much more detailed there, the cutouts as well. But yeah, this is a huge difference when it comes to portraits. It's clearly a win for the Mate 80 Pro Max. No doubt about it. And only if there's 3 shots, because we have only 3 lenses that we can choose. And you can choose in betweens if you want to, which is quite interesting. Some smartphones still cannot do this, and even the Mate 40 Pro back in the day could do it, but it's not really better in terms of quality. That's it. In terms of portraits, yeah, a clear win, where we see the advantage of the newer technology on the Mate 80 Pro Max. So all in all, some people are expecting me to put it on a ranking list. No, I will not rank the Mate 40 Pro. It's just simply too old to rank it, and it would be land on the bottom somewhere. But the Mate 80 Pro Max is ranked on my ranking system. Nevertheless, I think it was quite interesting to test those out. You can see how similar the camera bump is, and I think that Huawei is honoring with the Mate 80 Pro Max the old design of the Mate 40 Pro. And I think the Mate 40 Pro shows how good Huawei was in the past, because the main camera sensor definitely can be used nowadays. The telezoom is where you really notice the issue. But the ultra-wide angle as a cine lens, definitely very good, usable still. So if you want to have a cheap Mate 40 Pro just for vlogging, even the front-facing camera is pretty good for that, by the way. With the ultra-wide angle there, sure, why not? Just get this one here, just as a vlogging camera. You probably get it for cheap. USB-C port can just take a wireless mic if you need it, but the onboard audio is also quite good. Stabilization is quite good. Even lower light performance is quite good, even though I did not, honestly, I didn't expect it to test it outdoors now when it's really dark, but what can you expect? This is a larger sensor, newer sensor. It will definitely beat this one here. By far, by how far, by how much? For sure, by a lot. But this is everything for this video now. Hope you are satisfied with this comparison and a bit of a look between those two here. Until the next time, bye.